Letter 209 by Charles Lamb. Mary Lamb to Barbara Betham, aged 14 Nover, 1814. It is very long since I have met with such an agreeable surprise as the sight of your letter, my kind young friend, afforded me. Such a nice letter as it is too. And what a pretty hand you write. I congratulate you on this attainment with great pleasure, because I have so often felt the disadvantage of my own wretched handwriting. You wish for London news. I rely upon your sister Anne for gratifying you in this respect, yet I have been endeavoring to recollect whom you might have seen here, and what may have happened to them since, and this effort has only brought the image of little Barbara Betham, unconnected with any other person, so strongly before my eyes that I seem as if I had no other subject to write upon. Now I think I see you with your feet propped upon the fender, your two hands spread out upon your knees, an attitude you always chose when we were in familiar confidential conversation together, telling me long stories of your own home, where now you say you are moping on with the same thing every day, and which then presented nothing but pleasant recollections to your mind. How well I remember your quiet, steady face bent over your book. One day, conscience struck at having wasted so much of your precious time in reading, and feeling yourself, as you prettily said, quite useless to me, you went to my drawers and hunted out some unhemmed pocket handkerchiefs, and by no means could I prevail upon you to resume your storybooks till you had hemmed them all. I remember, too, your teaching my little maid to read, your sitting with her a whole evening to console her for the death of her sister, and that she in her turn endeavored to become a comforter to you, the next evening, when you wept at the sight of Mrs. Holcroft, from whose school you had recently eloped, because you were not partial to sitting in the stocks. Those tears, and a few you once dropped when my brother teased you about your supposed fondness for an apple dumpling, were the only interruptions to the calm contentedness of your unclouded brow. We still remain the same as you left us, neither taller nor wiser, or perceptibly older, but 3 years must have made a great alteration in you. How very much, dear Barbara, I should like to see you. We still live in Temple Lane, but I am now sitting in a room you never saw. Soon after you left us, we were distressed by the cries of a cat, which seemed to proceed from the garrets adjoining to ours, and only separated from ours by a locked door on the farther side of my brother's bedroom, which you know was the little room at the top of the kitchen stairs. We had the lock forced and let poor Puss out from behind a panel of the wainscot, and she lived with us from that time, for we were in gratitude bound to keep her, as she had introduced us to 4 untenanted, unowned rooms, and by degrees we have taken possession of these unclaimed apartments, first putting up lines to dry our clothes, then moving my brother's bed into one of these, more commodious than his own room. And last winter, my brother being unable to pursue a work he had begun, owing to the kind interruptions of friends who were more at leisure than himself, I persuaded him that he might write at his ease in one of these rooms, as he could not then hear the door knock, or hear himself denied to be at home, which was sure to make him call out and convict the poor maid in a fib. Here, I said, he might be almost really not at home. So I put in an old grate, and made him a fire in the largest of these garrets, and carried in one table, and one chair, and bid him right away, and consider himself as much alone as if he were in a new lodging in the midst of Salisbury Plain, or any other wide, unfrequented place where he could expect few visitors to break in upon his solitude. I left him quite delighted with his new acquisition, but in a few hours he came down again with a sadly dismal face. He could do nothing, he said, with those bare whitewashed walls before his eyes. He could not write in that dull, unfurnished prison. The next day, before he came home from his office, I had gathered up various bits of old carpeting to cover the floor, and, to a little break the blank look of the bare walls, I hung up a few old prints that used to ornament the kitchen, and after dinner, with great boast of what an improvement I had made, I took Charles once more into his new study. A week of busy labors followed, in which I think you would not have disliked to have been our assistant. My brother and I almost covered the wall with prints, for which purpose he cut out every print from every book in his old library, coming in every now and then to ask my leave to strip a fresh poor author, which he might not do, without my permission, as I am elder sister. There was such pasting, such consultation where their portraits, and where the series of pictures from Ovid, Milton, and Shakespeare would show to most advantage, and in what obscure corner authors of humbler note might be allowed to tell their stories. All the books gave up their stores but one, a translation from Ariosto, a delicious set of 24 prints, and for which I had marked out a conspicuous place. When lo, we found at the moment the Cissars were going to work that a part of the poem was printed at the back of every picture. What a cruel disappointment. To conclude this long story about nothing, the poor despised garret is now called the print room, and has become our most favorite sitting room. Your sister Anne will tell you that your friend Louisa is going to France. Miss Skepper is out of town. Mrs. Reynolds desires to be remembered to you, and so does my neighbor Mrs. Norris, who was your doctress when you were unwell. Her three little children are grown three big children. The lions still live in Exeter Change. Returning home through the Strand, I often hear them roar about 12 o'clock at night. I never hear them without thinking of you, because you seemed so pleased with the sight of them, and said your young companions would stare when you told them you had seen a lion. And now, my dear Barbara, farewell. I have not written such a long letter a long time, but I am very sorry I had nothing amusing to write about. Wishing you may pass happily through the rest of your school days, and every future day of your life. I remain your affectionate friend M. Lamb. My brother sends his love to you, with the kind remembrance your letter showed you have of us as I was. He joins with me in respects to your good father and mother, and to your brother John, who, if I do not mistake his name, is your tall young brother who is in search of a fair lady with a large fortune. Ask him if he has found her yet. You say you are not so tall as Louisa? You must be, you cannot so degenerate from the rest of your family. Now you have begun, I shall hope to have the pleasure of hearing from you again. I shall always receive a letter from you with very great delight. This charming letter is to a younger sister of Matilda Betham. What the work was which in 1814 drove Lamb into an empty room I do not know. It may have been something which came to naught. Beyond the essay on Taylor's See Vol. I. And a few brief scraps for the Champion, he did practically nothing that has survived, until some verses in 1818, a few criticisms in 1819, and in 1820, the first of the Ilia essays for the London Magazine. Louisa was Louisa Holcroft, about to go to France with her mother and stepfather, James Kenny. Miss Skepper was Basil Montagu's stepdaughter, afterwards the wife of B.W. Proctor, Barry Cornwall. Exeter Change, where there was a menagerie, was in the Strand, see note above. There is a further reference to the tallness of John Betham in Lamb's letter to Landor in 1832.